Hello everybody. In this video we're going to talk about the Infragistics NetAdvantage Windows Forms support for coded UI testing. So a little overview for those that don't really or haven't really played around with this feature within Visual Studio. Essentially, coded UI is a framework that allows for the automated testing of your Windows Forms application. Infragistics has this support built into the Windows Forms controls and components. Essentially, what automated testing is, for those that haven't delved into this field, is using software to record actions that are performed against your applications so that at a later time those same tests can be run, and those tests, while they're running, automatically load up your application and go through all of the pre-recorded actions and provide reporting on what passed or failed. So for example, I may want to record my application so that I can load up one form and then click on a cell, make a change, and then save it and make sure that nothing broke during that operation. I can record that action, and then later on, let's say if newer builds of that application are released by the development team, we just want to make sure that they didn't break anything while they made those changes to the app. The recorded test can be run again on the newer compiled version of the application. And if everything works out, that's great. And if something breaks, well, you just look at which individual tests have broken. And a good idea, there's various philosophies on how to create these automated tests. But one of the things I would like to recommend is that if you can somehow identify all of the use cases of your application that your end users may partake in, and try to perform each individual action as its own discrete recording, so that way you're not doing 1,000 things, and if something breaks, you're going to have a hard time locating exactly what broke in that long chain of recordings. So just do one thing. So you could create a method for changing a cell value. Okay, that's one method. Filtering something, that's another method. Or sorting, that's another method. So try to keep it discrete. It's better to have more tests than one big blob of tests. Same thing with, it's pretty similar pattern to separating various types of logic into their own methods for reuse and for maintainability. Okay, having said that, I'll try to keep the talking to a minimum and show you more stuff. So I went to the Infragistics documentation, to the Windows Forms help, and here's a topic, coded UI test extension. It's a good idea that you go through these topics just to get a better understanding. For example, these are the various controls that are supported within coded UI. So coded UI, again, is Microsoft testing framework that is within Visual Studio. And I'm going to show you some Visual Studio screen time as well to show you how it all works. These are the current controls that we support, where it makes sense that we have a bunch of other controls, but we wanted to deploy our first level of support within the controls that are mostly used and with the functionalities that are mostly used. We will probably add additional controls and expand the functionality within the controls as resources permit and time goes on. Okay? So just go through these because we don't support every single action on every single control. So it's a good idea to just understand what is capable before you go ahead and try to build a test that tests every single portion of your app. Alright, so that's one topic. The other topic is just how to use this, essentially, how to take advantage of it. So this gives you an overview of building an application with making sure that all the references are there, and then just running a simple interaction where you can record and assert some values. And that's about it. So that takes care of knowing where to get the information on how to work with this. You can always get in touch with our dev support too. They'll help you out for any other additional problems or questions you may have that are not covered in our resources online. Alright, so let's check out what I have here in Visual Studio. In Visual Studio I have this Windows Forms app, and I kept it very simple. It's just a one form app. I named this project so that it's something, just something silly. But anyway, if I just run this application, it's very simple. Infragistics WinGrid control that has a bunch of data. It's just one one entity loaded in here. It's just customers. And I turned on some functionality on the grid. Alright, so let's test this out. One thing we want to do is, first we notice it's just one project. What I'm going to do is right click and add a new project. And if you go to these templates, I'm going to go to test project, and I'm going to call this, let's see, how about we call it the test class. We'll call it that, the test class. It's essentially a class library. Come up with whatever naming convention is supported in your enterprise so that it's consistent and readable and understandable by all the developers in your teams. So I create the test class, and I'm going to delete this unit test one. Let's blow that one away. We don't need that one. Okay, we delete that one. And now this is where the action takes place. We want to make sure, let's take a look at some references here. I'm going to add a coded UI test. That's what we want to add here. That's how and then once we add this, it's going to fire up a dialog that will allow us to record various screen items. So let's do this. The things that we need to record must be running outside of Visual Studio. So in other words, if I run this project and it loads up my form or my app, it's not going to work because it's under the context of Visual Studio. We need to have an executable running. So the way we could do that is make sure this compiles and it works, because in reality, whenever we run these tests, we're running from an executable that was thrown at you by the dev team, and you're just testing their app. Alright, so we can navigate to where the bin directory is and double click the exe, or what I could do is just go to debug, start without debugging. That's the same thing as me bypassing Visual Studio. So if this breaks or does whatever, it's not going to stop Visual Studio. It's a separate process, not attached to Visual Studio. So let's maximize it real quick. And back to Visual Studio. Alright, so let's do this again. We're going to go into the test class here, right click, add coded UI test. Now we need to make sure that the Infragistics references are added. So it's doing that right now. See, Infragistics 4, it added all these references magically. So before, remember I expanded it, it did not have these, it did it now. All because we added the coded UI test. Alright, now let's do this. So we have two options, record actions or use an existing action recording. So let's record actions. This is going to create a brand new recording, so let's click OK. And now I'm going to, this recording dialog here, I can press this button to start the recording and I could play around with the UI. This allows me to drag and drop the crosshairs onto anything that has a value so I can extract values and then use that in code to assert that values equals certain things. And this allows me to exit the recording and generate in code that represents the actions I've taken. Alright, so let's start this recording. So I click on record, then I move up here and I'll change this. And I'll click off and then click back on, and that's it. Very simple test. I'll exit this and I'll call this edit test, and I'm going to add and generate. Okay, let's take a look at Visual Studio now to see what that has done. There it is. It generated this method and added edit test in there. And if I right click and go to the definition of this, we're going to notice that it added several items in here. So it added things like, grabbing the actual UI element that was in focus. Then it did the clicks here. It clicked again, so it basically recorded the actions that I've taken. And if I were to go back and run this test, and that is achieved by right-clicking on the method and running the test. So let's see what that does. The grid is brought up, the values are edited, and it ends. The recording and the test ends. Now imagine, this is a very simple example, but imagine performing a bunch of other actions on the grid, like for example if I wanted to do more stuff let's say if I right click and add another one, let's just add another one. Coded UI test. And let's just do another one, a complete different one. I can come here now. Let's start the recording. I'm going to come here and sort, and then we'll sort again. Let's see if we can move some columns around. And we do that and stop the recording. Let's see how it likes that one. Sort, column, move, test. I'll name it something like that. Add and generate. And let's go into Visual Studio and see what that does for us. So this is number 2. Let's bring this up here. And we're going to run this test. And that's it, the test passed. Alright, so that's basically one of the things that, one of the ways that you can use this and take advantage of the coded UI extensions within Visual Studio. Now, Infragistics Windows Forms development team had to alter the controls so that they expose whatever hooks are needed for the testing framework to work that way. Now, if you encounter any kind of issues or anything, you could always get in touch with dev support, but Infragistics has definitely done the best job that they could to integrate within the coded UI test environment. Now, and again, if this is something that you guys want to use, by all means, start making these recordings, and remember to keep the test really small and discreet, and try to be very explicit in your actions. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Infragistics. On the web at infragistics.com.